So now that we're building our bridge, we have to figure out a way to get from A major back to D major. And specifically, hopefully, getting to this 1-6 chord here. So there's a couple of things that we can consider, and one of them is sequencing. Sequencing is very, very common in bridges, particularly when we need to get from somewhere that feels relatively remote back to the tonic. And this is pretty remote. We're tonicizing, perhaps the implication here is perhaps that we're tonicizing E major. And so we need to get back from there. Circle of fifths is very, very useful because it moves back downwards. The typical circle of fifths progression, for instance, could go, let's say we were on an E major chord, could take us E to E7, then A to A7, and then take us back to D. We might want some sort of cadence to let us know that we're back in D, but this is the nice thing about a descending circle of fifths, is that it will help us descend back to our opening key. So I'm going to start with this and play around with some ideas. So let's start with this idea that we are tonicizing E, perhaps. And so we'll have this little G sharp here. We know that we have G sharps in this key, and that we need to work our way out of them. So we are going E up to G sharp. I'm just sort of creating a little passage here that sounds like it could start a sequence. What we'll then want to do is to, for this progression that I created, E to E7, A to A7, and then to D, we'll want to add the seventh here. So we'll add that 7, and now we go up, now we resolve that to A. Now perhaps A proceeds something like this. Maybe we'll use that same motive that we started with. But now it's on the third of the A major chord. And now we can resolve that to D. If we want the seventh, we could have this go downwards. This actually ended up working out pretty well. We have scale degree, so we have the fifth, so we have scale degree 5 to 4 and then to 3, if we're thinking in A major. So A major. Now if we're thinking about going back to D major, we have that same relationship, scale degree 5 to scale degree 4 to scale degree 3. So this ended up working out pretty well. And we might include courtesy accidental there. Now, for as we go onwards, let me delete the tempo indication. I'm going to connect this up a little bit, delete these two measures, because we're pretty close. We're pretty close now. Perhaps because actually at this moment right here, beat 3 of measure 8, we are exactly where we want to be for the start of the next voice entrance, since this second voice is essentially going to go down here. So we had the first voice enter, bum ba da bum 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 bum. The second voice entered, and started sequencing down, and then it's going to continue here, and our third voice is going to enter up here. So basically what I'm getting at is that perhaps this resolution is best saved until this beat. So basically, because since this is what we'll want for here, in other words, what I'm saying is, let's copy paste this over here. We'll get rid of this measure. And then we'll be ready to enter in with the next part of this. However, we have this beat that's unaccounted for. If we resolve right away it's going to sound a little stilted. We'll just be repeating that chord one more time. And let me put, again, let me put this sort of voice indication that this middle voice is going to be moving down here, just so that we keep that in mind. Here's going from measure 7. Now, so we have this, it's a little bit stilted in measure 8. We end up with that repetition, which is a little bit less than fugue-like. We want the sense of continual motion. So what I'm going to suggest is that we don't have the resolution quite immediately. So perhaps what we can do is, I still like having this leading tone here leading up to the D. So perhaps what we're going to do is something like this. And then work our way up to that D. Again, using this sort of scalar idea. Now, we'll also need to adjust the bass. There's a couple things that we could do. One of them, I think, is to do something like this. Perhaps. Go ahead and delete that D. We're also going to need to change this over. Let me go ahead and put this into the second layer here. And delete everything that's in this first layer. There we go. And then we will basically be switching these layers out too. Because we're clearing the way for the first voice to enter. So basically it'll be looking like this. This is essentially what we're heading towards, that this D in the second layer becomes the tenor voice here. So right now we have something like this. It feels maybe a little bit bare here with this open fifth. Maybe there's an easy way to change that. Maybe we can have this be like that. So we have, instead of just a bare fifth, we have a 3 and a 5. There we go. So it looks something like this. And then we have the start of the third voice there. Okay, so this is looking more and more like the start of a fugue, like a fugal exposition. Sounds something like this. So that's not too bad. That works pretty well. There's a couple things that we want to clean up, though. Let me delete some of these notes that we've had. And let us zoom in on a couple of these moments, specifically these 6/4s. Now, we could argue that these 6/4s are sort of acting like a pedal 6/4. That we have this 5 chord here on the downbeat. We go to a 1/6/4. It sort of continues to the next beat before going on to a 1/6. So the analysis might look something like this. before we go on to a 2-4-2 and then a 5-6-5 and then a 1. I still don't feel that these 1-6-4s are really in style. So I want to alter them a little bit so that we have, so that it feels a little bit more, just a little bit more Baroque. So a few possibilities exist. The one that I see right away is potentially moving this A. First of all, we know we have to move this A down to something else. If we move it down to a D, this melodic line doesn't really thrill me at the beginning of that bar. So at the beginning of bar 9, we have this. It sounds a little bit circular. It doesn't have much of the direction that we want in a melodic line in the Baroque era. What I'm thinking, though, is perhaps we could change this and maybe go to a 1-6. We do end up doubling the third, but particularly if we add in a nice little passing tone there and move ourselves up like that, we end up with some nice parallel sixth motion that's going on. So we have these as non-chord tones. The G and the E are dissonant against the F sharp, but they are consonant with each other. They are sixths, and that's what we like to see with passing dissonances in this style. So this could work. We have this sort of arpeggiated 5-6-4 here, which is fine. And then we work our way up from a 1-6, and then we have this 1-6-4 here that's just very fleeting and is really the result of passing motion that's elaborating a 1-6 chord on either end. Let me highlight that. So we have a 1-6 chord here, we have a 1-6-4 elaborating it, and then we go back to a 1-6. That seems much more in style. Here's what that sounds like. A little bit of a wrong note in there, sorry about that. Now we do have this voice crossing to worry about. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. Every once in a while you do have voice crossings like this that come up within expositions. The main thing that I'm focusing on is how we're crafting the exposition here with some basic materials. Obviously, hopefully, as you are writing your own fugues, you have lots and lots of time to revise. As we're writing it sort of in real time, I'm not going to worry about that as much. There's a few, if we wanted to play around with it, we could maybe make this moment a 1-6 and play around with some other inversions that are going on, so we don't have this voice crossing that happens here. But in terms of issues, this is minor compared to the fact that we'd have these structural 1-6-4s that would have been an issue. But now we've corrected them. So right now we have the start of a fugal exposition, and that works out pretty well. Again, sounding something like this. Let me go ahead and delete these question marks because we solved those earlier. So our fugal exposition, starting with our subject, continuing on with our answer, which was a tonal answer. We have a counter subject down here. Then we have a bridge up here. Then we have our subject in the uppermost voice. The voice that was giving the answer continues with the counter subject. And then down here we have free counterpoint. Of course, we composed all of this beforehand and just unfolded it in the process of this fugal exposition. That's really what we're doing here with a fugal exposition, is unfolding basic sort of genetic material of three-voice counterpoint. Here it is, slowed down. And there we have it, a basic 3-voice exposition based on a little chorale tune. So I hope that you have fun writing your own fugal subjects, creating some harmonizations for them, and then unfolding them into a fugal exposition.